Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the Tattoos and Toddlers podcast. As you know, we have this mixture of topics that we talk about. We talk about tattoos, we talk about potentially toddlers or parenting things. We also talk a little bit about business too, like business ownership and children and tattoo stories all in one. But you know what? Anything can happen on these podcast episodes. So I want to welcome Ray today. Ray, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in East Tennessee. I've been dating my wife for 45 years now. We've been together. We have one son, 34 years old, and he's a barber, owns his own barber company here in East Tennessee. And I have two jobs. I have my day job is I'm in sales and insurance, and my nighttime job is I'm a identity exchange coach or a personal coach for the Ministry of Identity Exchange with Jamie and Donna Winship.
I love it. So, and just fun fact, everybody, I met all of these identity exchange coaches through the program beginning of 2025. I've already gone through the intensive at least once. I'm probably going to go through about several times because it's one of those things that's a lifelong journey. And I just loving have I love having conversations really and truly around these topics and especially how it infuses into our everyday life. And I know we kind of sort of talked about what we might talk about today, but I'm curious about how has the identity stuff worked its way in and out of your life over these last years?
Oh wow! Well, let's see.
I know, right?
I've known the Winships for 9 years, and actually, it's interesting because I'm going to be speaking at a church in a couple of weeks, and the topic is to take a biblical story and then parallel it to your story. So I'm right in the middle of my story right now, going back and reliving some stuff. And yeah, when I was introduced to identity exchange at age 54. I'm 62 now, so about 8, almost 9 years ago now, and I was a believer in Christ. But it really changed the trajectory of my spirituality to the point that I just bought it hook, line, and sinker, I guess, and began to live it. And then as Jamie and Donna's ministry gained momentum and size, and he wrote a book and it came out. They were in need of some coaches, so they contacted me about 3 years ago to be a coach, and so that's my nighttime job now. So I love it. It's one of the reasons I get up in the morning. It's just when I went through it, you've been there. I just told God, whether the audience is 1 or 10,000, that'll be up to you. But I will talk about freedom in Christ to anybody who will listen. And one thing led to another, and now I do it as a nighttime gig, I guess.
I love that because you said you're in sales in one point, and then you're doing the identity exchange. So how does the identity aspect, just the concepts infuse into the other parts of your life too?
Oh,
Like in your
yeah.
sales jobs or the people that you meet along your way. Like,
Sure. Okay. Well, we'll start with sales.
yeah.
Because it's funny because I've been in sales all my life. I was in physical fitness, nutrition. I was in pharmaceuticals and now insurance. And, usually when you change sales jobs, they always give you these personality tests to see if you're a sales type.
Yeah.
And we were laughing the other night. I'm not sure that I could pass those tests now after going through the intensive
Hmm.
and being and getting my own identity in Christ. And the reason is usually those tests want to see how aggressive you are, and that type thing. And one of the things that has changed in my sales career is I don't operate from fear anymore. If we
Hmm.
truly believe that the Lord is our shepherd and we lack nothing, then we don't have to be fearful, because if he is our shepherd, then we are under his care. And the line truly says, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. So now, and I always put it this way, if you operate from fear as a salesman, you won't service people, you will use people. People will become tools to your income. I've got to get you to say yes so that I can have this much money in the bank at the end of the week. As opposed to, if I'm not afraid, I can find out, one, do you need what I'm selling? And how does it solve a problem in your life? And now I'm servicing you as opposed to using you. The whole dynamic of sales changes. And actually, it's been, I feel like, more successful in that way of just turning it over to him and letting the chips fall where they may.
I have found that interesting because I've been in the photography business for about 18 years now, and I work a lot of weddings, and I know that not everybody is my client, but we can always help people even if they aren't our client. And I've noticed that shift in my life over the last little bit is whether or not they hire me, how can I help them navigate?
Right, right.
And it
Yeah.
does make me feel better about it too, because they're still having a service experience with me, I guess you could
Mm-hmm,
say.
mm-hmm,
And I'm still operating out of what I would call my identity of, you know what, here, let me lead you and guide you to this option or give you some information you didn't know already
mm-hmm.
and help you navigate the unknown a little bit.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you, this may be personal, and you could, but do you feel like as you service people and take money out of the equation, that money kind of takes care of itself?
It does, especially this year.
Yeah.
Especially,
Okay.
and
Cool.
everybody listening, you have to understand there's been a major shift for me. I've only been Weirdo Weddings for 5 years, but the shift has been very gradual, and every year I'm going towards that. Just be with people, love on people, and then if they book me or not, I don't try to be in that fear mindset and that
Right.
heart set, right? And just let it be what it is. And I find that sometimes jobs come my way. There could be two or three in that month, and there's sometimes where some jobs just kind of like go away and they're just gone. And I expected this amount, but like now that amount's gone. But I'm sitting here like normally my past time, I would just be like freaking out about that. Like, well, I was really needing that.
Right.
But then now I'm just like, okay, so that means there's potentially something else opening up for me, and
Sure.
it's fine.
Yeah. If
So,
if he is our shepherd and we lack nothing, then if we don't get it, we didn't need it. If we had it and lost it, we didn't need it. And if we had it and it's taken from us, we didn't need it. If he's our shepherd.
yeah, and I have found that just to be helpful this year because especially as things intensify, especially in the events industry. I don't know how it is for y'all out there and doing your things, but in the events industry, I was just talking with some of my wonderful boss babes. We were talking about it's sometimes unpredictable, but it does have seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we're consistently going back and forth in our head, like, is it me or is it the world? Is it me or is it the world? You know
Right.
what? It could be both.
It could be both. Exactly. Exactly.
But it's fun in its own way. It's fun to navigate because then when we open up to each other, like we talk a lot about community, right? When we open
Mm-hmm.
up to each other and talk about our look, our biggest fears, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or our biggest. I host a room weekly, even still with wedding pros. Like, what is your win or struggle this week? Do you have a win that you actually want to celebrate, or is there a struggle that we could, all navigate together?
Sure.
And something about those communities. Have you found that to be helpful on your journey as well as like all these communities that we have access to?
Oh, absolutely. I think, of course, in identity exchange, we teach a connective
Uh-huh.
world view as opposed to a disconnected worldview. And then to your point of asking the question, is it the world? Is it me? Is it whatever? One of the things we also teach is that a negative emotion, fear, let's say,
Yeah.
is an invitation to a conversation for transformation. And so instead
Hmm.
of holding that fear inside, maybe I want to take that to God in prayer, or maybe I want to take it to, my group of three guys that I can say, look, I'm scared, guys. I just want to be honest. I'm scared, and let's talk this out. And just sometimes just confessing the fear, it kind of goes away.
It really does. I was trying to explain that today, even just having a conversation, and I was just like, you know what? Just say it out loud. Just say it. Like, it's going to be so much less scarier if you just confess it, like for real. And I found myself, sharing a piece of my story today and just kind of like going through what has happened in the last, I don't know. Now we're in June, so it's like 6 months.
Right.
But the point was is that it's still ongoing. It doesn't stop. And
Absolutely.
it's just a beautiful thing to start to recognize the things that come in and out of your life versus only having that one viewpoint and only having that narrow, just, you don't see possibility when you're so narrowly focused on certain negative things even. So,
Absolutely. Well, the being certain creates separation.
hmm.
When I'm certain about something, I mean, 2 plus 2 is 4. I get that, but when I'm certain about something that there's really no certainty in,
Yeah.
but I want to stay certain, then I create teams. I'm right, you're wrong. I've got my team, you've got your team, and we're separated. We're not working together. And it's that certainty that will create that. I actually read that studying Ignatius of Loyola. And he was talking about the passive faith, one of them being belief. You kind of grew up in church and it's there,
Yeah.
but you're so certain about the way you grew up that it creates uh, teams, it creates separation, it creates dogma, it creates prejudice. They're
Yeah.
not like me. I don't like them. I'm not sure God likes them either. That kind of deal. So it's that certainty that does create that separation.
Yeah, and I like, this is me being me, but like I have tended to quote Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure a lot. And it's knowing that we know nothing
Right.
in its own funny way is it's a kind of like almost a true statement, because even if we think we're certain about something, it could be a different answer. It could be a different
Exactly.
insight. I don't know, it's so funny.
Think of things that you were certain about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
There's things that I was certain about spiritually 15 years ago that I think is heresy today. And I would have fought you over them 15 years ago. So it is an ongoing journey.
Well, and that begs another question here. Like when you're looking back at your younger self, even the 15-year-old, younger self,
Mm-hmm.
and here lately, I have an 8-year-old, so I appreciate the fact that, like you understand being a parent. And I have one child, so
I've got one.
I have yeah, exactly. I have an 8-year-old, and I'm navigating not only my personal childhood experiences through her growing up,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also like letting her be herself, not trying to put my stuff on her.
Mm.
Did you have periods in your life, even before identity exchange, where you were navigating that as a parent and
Oh,
kind of going through things, right? Like I know, but yeah, parenting is a
yeah.
thing, right?
Oh,
Like it's a
well,
thing.
exactly. And the sad part about when I went through identity exchange and it changed a lot of my viewpoints.
Yeah.
I was 54, like I told you,
Yeah.
and my son was grown. So
Hmm.
really, all I could navigate was all the things I'd screwed up. And my son would probably tell you he's had two fathers, one pre identity exchange that fathered out of fear and certainty,
Yeah.
and one that uh, fathers out of love and more of a calmness and a peace. And he would say that the second one is better. I look at your hair and I could tell you there was one time that he was playing soccer, little fella, maybe 6, 7 years
Aw.
old, and somebody brought a can of hairspray paint. And all the guys wanted to spray paint their hair blue, which was the team color.
Yeah.
And I was so dogma and so certain because to me, spraying your hair blue, you were immediately Dennis Rodman, if you remember Dennis Rodman.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my son is not going to be a Dennis Rodman. I mean, I was an athlete and I've always respected the athlete and just come in and did their job. There was no flash. There was no nothing. You just come in, did your
Exactly.
job and, no braggadocio, all that. And it still bothers me because it was picture day that day,
Oh
and
no.
he's visibly, you could tell he's been crying
Oh.
because I won't let him paint his hair blue. And if I could redo that again, I certainly would. We've talked through it. He's not trauma. He's not seen a
That's
therapist.
so cute though. Like I'm imagining picture day.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one of the times I look back and I go, man, I just really screwed up. Let the boy paint his hair blue. 6, 7 years old. Come on, it's not gonna.
I
Yeah,
know. There's so, I mean, that's why I'm consistently reminding myself that she's still so young
yeah,
and there's so much experience of life. And I know that, and even when I first had her, I was like, ah, she is not me. Like, I cannot say that she is me because I handled life differently.
right, right.
Because I grew
Uh,
up differently, and my
yeah,
husband and I have had many long talks about how differently we both grew up
mhm,
and how she's not going to have the certain aspects that we had.
right.
And so navigating that as a parent has been very interesting, but then also learning all this stuff and through the identity exchange is so interesting too because I'm trying to like navigate how do I teach this to my 8-year old and
Right.
not ever feeling like a teacher.
Hmm.
But I know that I do in some aspects, teach. But also, I was going to say this also, my parents are both still alive. And so I call them up and talk to them about this stuff. I'm like, so here's what's going on in my life. And we start talking about our past and how things were like that. And I know, like you just said with your son, you had to like kind of go back and like have some conversation.
Yeah, look, Dad's really sorry about that. That was like he totally just. But again, it was operating out of fear.
Yeah.
Right, my son's going to turn into some Dennis Rodman weirdo because he painted his hair blue one time. And then
Yeah.
transfer that fear onto him. And now it's different. And I think grandparents too. You've
Mhm.
got, thank God, you've got your parents that you can call.
Yeah.
They are not as fearful because they've been through it now, and they
Yeah.
see, things that we thought were catastrophic are going to turn out okay. So I think that's why grandparents are a lot cooler than parents
It's
because
true
they're like,
though.
seen the movie, we know it's going to be okay. It's not catastrophic. Nobody's dead, and they are a little bit, Bill
A little
Cosby
bit
said,
more
no,
in
Bill
their own
Cosby said
way.
they're
Yeah, a
trying to
little
get
bit more
into
chill.
heaven, but yeah, they're a little chill. They're a little more chill. They've seen it, and they're not projecting that fear that we do as parents because this is our first go at it, and we don't know how it's going to end. I know the first 9 months of my son's life, my wife and I had just accepted the fact that we would never sleep more than 2 hours ever again for the for the rest of our life. You know?
This is where I came to realize sleep was so, so important.
Well, it's one of the reasons my son's an only child. My wife said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this again.
That is too funny. No, I love that. And I love what you said about grandparents too, because I find myself with the grandparents that I do have left that are alive, and on my husband's side and my side, it's getting smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find is the dynamic between my daughter and, her grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that everybody that I tend to make friends with a variety of people, but
Mm-hmm.
I also tend to gravitate to those who are, I mean, come on, they're in their 70s and they just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
like, whatever. I'm gonna go do the things. I have no apologies to make. I've done the thing. I've seen the movie 5 times. All that stuff. They have no need to prove anything to anyone, and I think that's just a beautiful space to be in.
Oh, it really is. I can remember my son being about middle school age. Him and about 3 or 4 boys were going to go hang out at the mall, and they're getting the shoes that match the shirt and this and that, and just trying to get everything right. And I said, guys, I'm excited for you today. And they said, why? Because we're going to the mall. And I said, no, you're going to meet the coolest guy you've ever met today at the mall. And they said, really? What? Was it a guest or something? I said, no, he's going to have socks and flip flops on. He's going to have a dirty T-shirt and shorts, and he's going to be walking around the mall not giving a rip what anybody thinks about that. And I said, he's the coolest guy you're going to meet today because he's at peace. He doesn't have to prove anything.
That's such a great place to be. I know that I'm still becoming into that as well. It's so much fun. Because we tend to judge each other whether we know it or not. We judge
Right.
each other, and until I tell people these days, I said, don't sit on the first impression. Just don't. Just give them 20 to 30 other first impressions because they're not going to show who they are right away. Most of us don't. And most of us do make snap judgments whether we like to or not.
Mm-hmm.
But you have any examples of that? Like that's just something I was thinking about today. Like, the snap judgments that we make against people and how it is to come into this place where we just don't have to be ruled by what others think of us.
Yeah, I remember going to church years ago, and a guy came in, had dreads, had some color in them, a few tats, and this is 20 years ago. Tats weren't as accepted as they are now.
True
Uh,
that.
but he sat down in church by a friend of mine, and she noticed that he had writing all on his arm. Wasn't tats; it was writing on the back of his hand. It was
Yeah.
right on the back of his hand, and she she judged him, and she was honest about it later. Like, I just thought, what's he even doing in church? That kind of deal. And so she said, I couldn't talk about his hair because I was judging his hair. I couldn't talk about his tattoos. I was judging his tattoos. But she said, I asked him, what's that writing on your hand? And he says, it's a couple of Bible verses that I want to memorize, and it's a list of people that I'm praying for today.
Aww.
Yeah. And she said, I felt about that tall in the pew. Like, I'm not trying to memorize Bible verses today. I'm not praying for anybody today that I can think of, but yet I'm judging this guy who's sitting beside me in church, on that snap judgment based on hair and tattoos. That was all she was basing it on. He hadn't even said a word yet, and so, yeah, that we can do that. We can do that for sure.
Yeah, and I've noticed that since I've been pink-headed about 18 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You were pink-headed before pink-headed was cool.
It really was because you said 20 years ago, and I was like, yeah, where I was 20 years ago, I was a newlywed. About 2 years in, I asked my boss if I could dye my hair, and actually it was supposed to be highlights, which turned into like my whole head. And then I thought to myself, and I walked into my church at the time, and my husband and I ended up serving in the singles ministry because we just the things navigating, singles navigating, trying to find their partners, whatever. And I walked into the church and the drummer, he looked at me and I was like, yeah, he gets it. He's like, yeah. And I was like, that's all I needed. Just that one person.
Me and the drummer, we're good.
Me and the drummer, we have an understanding. And then there was always this one friend, maybe you have these one friends too, that they can speak directly to the core of your being.
Mm-hmm.
And all he had to say was, Jen, I just love you. And
Mm,
that's all he would, I would say that he would see me, not the outward me.
yeah.
And he has since passed away, but every time I go downtown Dallas, I'm in Dallas. Every
Yeah.
time I go in downtown Dallas, his last name is a street. It just it's a coincidence.
Uh-huh.
But every time I go past that street, I'm like, oh, I remember him.
Oh, cool. Cool. Good deal.
Do you have certain things that have happened in your life like that where you have these moments you're like, oh my God, they saw me. Oh, this is awesome, you know?
Yeah, I have a few. Um, I had it's kind of funny. It's a hero of mine who's in his 80s right now, and if I
Aw.
walked in his room, he probably wouldn't know me now. But I remember seeing him at church years ago, and he was just a very handsome, rugged, but obviously older man. Um, Turns out he's a football coach, a very godly man. But I looked at him, and I told my wife, that's how I want to grow old. I said, I think I could kick his butt, but I don't know that I'd want to go to the trouble. I mean, he just had that Jock Ewing, if you remember the Dallas, that Jock Ewing, just that rugged, just manliness, if you will.
Yeah.
White hair, total white hair,
Yeah.
combed well, very handsome, very tan because he was a football coach. He was in the sun all the time.
Yep. All the
What's
time. Yep.
funny about that is, and I'll finish the story about your question, but when I saw him and I said, there's an old man that I want to grow old like, I did the math. He was 58. I'm 62. So,
Ooh.
so all I can hope is there's some young man at my church looking at me going, there's an old man I want to grow old like. That's all I can hope for, because I'm actually older than he was when I thought he was an old man. But we were at a some kind of a political event, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he started to say something, but he kind of choked up. He couldn't say it. And he just patted me on the back and he said, I just want you to know you're a good man. And he wanted to say more, but he couldn't. This rugged man, this rough, tough guy, he couldn't say more for choking up. And that's one of those times I'll never forget. And then I went to a retreat, and part of the retreat was you receive letters. Backstory: the wives or somebody, a friend, would get all your friends to send you letters, and the last day you read the letters. And his letter was one of my favorites. And one of the things he said in it was, Ray, one of the things I like about you is you've never treated me like an old man.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'll never forget that. So yeah, that's a couple of stories I have about him, and I've got some other friends as well that have spoke into my life over the years, and it's like, I'm going to remember this. This isn't something I'm going to forget.
That's beautiful too, because as a photographer, I'm consistently reliving memories by looking at photos. But
Sure.
sometimes it's just a memory trigger of something, and I can even visualize. For me, I was literally visualizing y'all's interaction in my head, like what did that look like? And I was just imagining that. And I was
Right.
like, because I was like, what would that look like in a photograph? And how would I relive that moment? And so when
Mm.
I was talking about my other friend, I was imagining him when I walked into the building and he had this big smile on his face. And it's just so nice to be able to pull those memories back up and just kind of be like, oh.
So I'm assuming if he is dead now,
Yeah.
um, and I'm assuming he didn't die early, he might have been one of the older people in the church, somebody that you might not have expected to say, "Hey, pink hair, yay," that kind of thing. Or was he younger, or was he an older
I
person
think
in the
he
church?
was, what's so funny is I don't recall how old he was. I just know he
Right.
was older than me at the time. And
Uh
this was,
huh.
18 years ago.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he was like 6 foot plus giant teddy bear,
Mm.
dark skinned man. And we were all in like the theater arts stuff together.
Okay.
And but he was like the sweetest, just gentle giant.
Mm.
That's the only way I can explain it. So
Right.
when he said something, you listened.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of those people that are super quiet and they're not like overly,
Yes.
you got to look out for them because they've got some really cool stuff to say if you have that opportunity to
Yes. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
That's the
every
way
time I
I
would
was.
see him, it would be like I remember what you said to me, and I would just always say I just love you back, just
Yeah, that's the
that
way this
kind of
guy
stuff.
was. He didn't say much, but when he said it, it was really cool. And then his prayers were just awesome. I mean, it was like when he was praying, you were afraid to peek. You were afraid Jesus was standing right in front of
He didn't want to leave.
you. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember one time we put on this little thing in my house for a small group, and it was about wearing masks. And this was obviously, again, 18, 17 years ago. And I remember he was standing on the sidewalk. He's like, "You have cats, don't you?" And he turned around and walked back to his car because he was really allergic to
Allergic.
cats.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "I'll be right back." And he still ended up having like a little bit of a facial reaction, but I
Oh,
felt
sure.
so terrible. But it was just, I'll never forget those kind of stories with
Right.
him. It's so much fun. And I'm getting the wrap up the conversation warning from my Zoom here, but
Okay.
I wanted to see, well, first of all, do you have any tattoo stories that we could go over?
I have no tattoos. That just when I came up, tattoos weren't a thing. If you had tattoos when I came up, you were either been in prison or the military. That was the only two acceptable tattoos at the time.
And it's so funny because in the 90s, I was introduced, some of my family from South Dakota. So I was like introduced to Sturgis and I was like, hey, that's pretty cool.
Right.
I didn't get my first one till the 90s. So yeah, I
Okay.
graduated and went to college and I was like, tattoo, yay.
Yeah.
But if you did have a story, I was going to say this is a great time to share it. And some people
Yeah.
who have never had tattoos have fun tattoo stories too, because they've seen somebody else in their life.
Right.
But there's something about it. There's something about outward expressions. It's so interesting. So for everybody listening, I will share a piece of my newest tattoo story with y'all
Cool.
because this will also have to do with identity. So we can end with identity on this one. So
Sure.
recently, I got, and I'll show everybody in the pictures and stuff, but I have this great forearm tattoo telling basically my life story in its own way. But this year, or like a month or two ago, I added waves to it. And it's because the meaning of my name is like fair one or white wave. Because my name is Jennifer, and that was the 70s name back in the time. So I was asking the Lord so many different questions, like, you have to explain this to me. This is such a weird meaning. I don't even know. And then I just felt the need to like add on to this extension of my tattoo a wave pattern of, the water, the sensation of water and the sound of water, the ocean. Oh, I love the ocean and stuff like that to remind me of the meaning of my name.
Mm.
And so the meaning of that, my mother gave me this name, I gave my daughter her name, right? So for you, in things that has been revealed to you over time and say your name or certain pieces of your identity that has come to light, is there something we could leave somebody with today about this process of embracing who you are and your identity?
Yeah. Well, the first identity I heard from God was son. Just very simple.
As an SON?
SSON. Yes. Because I was a performer. I was a religious performer. I
Mhm.
mean that by I was a goody two shoes trying to earn. In
Yeah.
fact, I really didn't think God liked me very much, and He was probably going to send me to hell. But my philosophy was I was going to be so good that He would have to have a very good reason to send me to hell.
Yeah, you have to have that
So, so I had this,
list, checklist.
yeah, I had this distorted view of God, of this scorekeeper in heaven. And so the first thing I heard was son. And I heard that while I was holding my son because I was kind
Mm.
of praying. And again, it
Ooh.
was late night. I hadn't spoken. I mean, I hadn't slept in months. And I was thinking if somebody came through that door to harm him, I would kill him. I mean, they're not, I would die for this kid.
Yeah.
And in my spirit, I heard why. And I was like, that's a stupid question. He said, no, he's not mowed the yard. He's not a starting quarterback, straight A student. He's not sent you a Father's Day card. He has pooped. He has eat. He has cried. You have slept no more than 2 hours in the last 3 months, but you would die for him. Why? And I said, because he's my son.
Uh,
And as soon as I said it, it was like God said, exactly. Son cannot be earned. Son is a gift. And that was the first thing I heard in my identity. I have a longer identity, but that's what started even before the Winships and identity exchange. I heard son, and then second thing I heard was fearless. So when I talk to God, I come to Him as I call Him. I say, I'm your fearless son, and
oh,
fearless would not have been in the top 100 adjectives that I would have described me. I was
right,
very, very, very fearful,
right.
but I did everything to make you think I wasn't. I was a weightlifter, bodybuilder, wrestler, football player, bow hunter, drove a truck, all that stuff. But I was fearful, and He calls me fearless. And so I had to come to grips with that what He calls me is actually the opposite of what I've thought I was all my life. And
Mm.
now, if I always say the inner identity is what God would tell you before He asked you to jump off a cliff. So if He asked me to jump off a cliff, I'd say, God, what do you want me to know? He'd say, you're my fearless son. And that would get me over the cliff. To know that He calls me fearless son is all I need to know.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
And when I went through the program, my personal one kind of came more of very artistic because it's just that is my nature. That is my
Mhm.
being. And
Sure.
so mine was splatter paint because splatter paint is unpredictable. It's beautiful. It can go anywhere, everywhere and make a mark. And it has no set definitions and boundaries. It does because it's a painting, but each one is different. So everywhere I go, everything I do is going to look different
Mm.
to many things. And I think that's what made me excited. I was like, yeah, it's totally me. It
Yeah.
totally
That's
is.
so cool. That
It
is,
is super
yeah.
cool. And as we have to round out our conversation, it's been so wonderful to have you on, Ray,
Oh,
and
thank
just
you.
explore part of your story and explore a little bit of the identity and everything that is going on currently in our lives. So thank you for coming on the
Oh,
podcast.
dude, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a bunch.
Absolutely. See y'all on the next episode. Bye bye.